Hey friends, it's Lucas here. I hope you're doing well today. It's Canadian Thanksgiving, so if you're Canadian like me, happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you're getting some time to relax and hang out with your friends and family or whatever. That's not what I wanted to talk about today. What I really want to talk about is the fact that yesterday was World Mental Health Day, and that's the topic. It's a heavy topic, and I really hope you'll stick with me to the end because it's probably one of the most important topics we'll ever cover on this channel, and in fact probably one of the most important topics you could ever talk about as a human being these days, and that's mental health. I was going to make this video yesterday, but like I said, I got kind of busy and time just got away from me and I didn't. But in a way I actually think it's better, because one of the things I talk about a lot regarding mental health, and especially regarding things like World Mental Health Day, or in Canada here we have Bell Let's Talk Day, or Suicide Prevention Month. We have these special months and days of the year set aside to talk about mental health, and that pisses me off. Not because we're talking about mental health, I think that's super important, but what upsets me is that we stop talking about it other days of the year. You know, and I mean, that's not entirely true, but a few days a year you see all over social media everybody acknowledging their flaws, everybody talking about their mental health struggles, everybody reminding each other that it's okay to not be okay. And then the calendar flips over and it's as though all those problems just go away and we all stop talking about them, and it gets quiet again out there, and that annoys me, because I think every day should be World Mental Health Day. I think every day should be Suicide Prevention Day, because it is one of the foremost problems that we face in our world. I know a lot of people think that the current situation with this virus is one of the most dangerous things we've ever felt, or maybe the current political situation in some parts of the world is maybe one of the most dangerous things we've ever faced as a society, but really and truly I think the depression and mental health crisis we are dealing with as a global community right now is the single biggest threat to life on this planet that we currently face. And you may disagree with me, that's fine, but I was sent a study a couple weeks ago that I was actually afraid to click on. You know, I was sent a study by a friend of mine, and the headline on the link said that the CDC had, I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was like the CDC had surveyed a group of people, and 25% of the respondents between 18 and 24 had considered killing themselves in the last 6 months. 1/4 of the young people they surveyed had thought that they would be better off dead at some point in the last 6 months. That's insane. You know, I was sent the study and I read that headline and I thought, you know, it's actually probably true. You know, I started thinking about some of the things I've experienced over the last little while in my own life. You know, I came home from work about 5 months ago and I ran into my neighbor in the driveway. He had this funny look on his face. I started talking to him and asked him how he was doing, and he said he had just come back from visiting his friend. His friend who had been visiting quite frequently lately because he was worried. His friend who had been quite depressed lately. His friend who my neighbor had been visiting frequently because he didn't want him to be alone. And he had gone to visit his friend and didn't get an answer when he knocked on the door, which wasn't uncommon. So he walked around the backyard to the garage, which was a spot he knew he could often find his friend hanging out. Only this time he found his friend hanging from the ceiling. And my neighbor, through tears, told me the story of having to cut his best friend down from a rope, and take his lifeless body down from the ceiling. And then I thought about another time, not too long after that, when I woke up early on a Sunday morning to my phone ringing, which is uncommon. Nobody calls me, especially not early on a Sunday morning. And I woke up thinking this is one of two things. This is either a scam call or this is something really important. And I grabbed my phone, and on the caller ID I saw a good friend of mine's name, and immediately it hit me. This is something really important. So I answered, and he had a weird sound in his voice. He said, "Lucas, I didn't know who to call." He said, "I didn't know who to call because you're the only person I know who I can have this kind of honest, open conversation with." And then he went on to tell me about the evening he had had, or the night he had just had. See, he told me that he had been sitting around having dinner the night before, watching hockey like he always did, or often did, when he got a phone call from a friend of his. A friend of his who about 3 weeks earlier had attempted, unsuccessfully, thank goodness, to kill himself. He got a phone call from his friend and he said he couldn't make out what his friend was trying to say. He said he could make out mumbling and moaning and screaming, and through the jumbled words he figured out that something was wrong and that his friend needed help. So he dropped what he was doing and he went over to his friend's place and he knocked on the door and he didn't get an answer. And so he kicked in the door and he went inside and found his friend drifting in and out of consciousness on the couch after having eaten an entire bottle of pills in a second attempt to kill himself. He got him to the hospital, got his stomach pumped, got him on whatever they have to do to help with an overdose. And luckily his life was spared at that time, but then my friend was left not knowing what to do, not knowing who to call, not knowing where to turn, any of that. I got word about 3 weeks later that that young man that my friend had delivered to the hospital that night attempted a third time and was unfortunately able to successfully end his life. And one more family went without their son, and one more group of friends is going to get together next year on the day that it happened and remember their friend that's no longer with them for no good reason. And it's hard because it's not the only things I remember. You know, earlier in the spring, I was sitting down logging onto a Zoom call with a bunch of friends that we connected virtually quite a bit because we weren't able to see each other in person for a while. And we sat down for a meeting, and just as we were about to start chatting, one of our friends on the line got a phone call on her cell phone. She muted her mic. But as she was talking, we could all tell immediately that something wasn't right. She was crying. She had this desperate, horrified look on her face. When her phone call ended, she came back on the line and says, "Guys, I have to go." And when we asked what was up, she said, "That was my best friend. She just called me to tell me that her 12-year-old daughter killed herself last night." 12 years old. What reason does a 12-year-old have to feel like they shouldn't exist anymore? Like, it's insane. It's insane. You know, and then I think about 3 weeks ago in my own life, I went and grabbed a shawarma. I was gonna go sit down by the river and have some dinner after a long day of doing some welding and fabrication work on my trailer with my good friend. I grabbed a shawarma and I walked down the river, and there was a lady on the other side of the park being a little bit belligerent. She was drunk. Kind of uncommon on a Sunday afternoon, but not totally unheard of. I didn't pay too much attention to her. I sat there by the river watching the world go by, and this lady, unnoticed to me, had walked up behind me. And she ended up sitting down on the bench next to me, and we had a 15-minute long, totally one-sided, incoherent conversation. She couldn't form a sentence. I could barely understand what she was trying to say. The only thing I could find out was that her name was Robin. She had just been through some kind of breakup, and the one fully coherent sentence she was able to utter was, "Please don't let me kill myself. Please don't let me kill myself." I'm so lucky that I'm the kind of person who actually listens to people even when they seem like they're not worth listening to. And after hearing that, I didn't know what to do, so I called 911 and I got medical attention to help her deal with her obvious intoxication. You know, that's one of the things with suicide, is that most of the time it happens when we're intoxicated. Most of the time it happens when we don't have our best judgment about her. So I thought, you know, at the very least, if I can make sure she's safe until the drunkenness or the drugs or whatever it was she was on had worn off, then maybe there was a decent chance she could get to see a counselor or a therapist or something, and that she'd go on and be okay. But you know, the weirdest part about that is because I was not related to her, I didn't know her, she wasn't a friend, I have no idea what happened after the ambulance took her away that day. And it sits with me a lot. And the thing that bothers me even more than that is the fact that those are only a fraction of the stories I have like that. Those are only a small portion of the people in my life that have been directly impacted by suicide. Now, I still remember showing up to school one morning when I was in grade 11, showing up, and there was one particular locker in the hallway where my locker was, and it was decorated with flowers and balloons, and it was covered floor to ceiling in sticky notes with the most incredible love messages. I didn't know the person whose locker it was, but later that day they called all the students to the gymnasium where they were going to make an announcement, and they told us that she had killed herself. And it was a big deal because at that time she was one of the few students in our school who had ever attempted and completed suicide. I look back on that and I think how lucky we were that it happened so rarely that they actually called us all into the gym to tell us. And they actually were able to take the time, because now it happens so frequently that schools don't even bother slowing down. It happens so frequently they don't have time to bring the whole school together to grieve like they did for that. And it's crazy because these problems are getting worse and worse and worse all the time. So when I read that headline on the study that my friend had sent me that said 25% of young people 18 to 24 had considered suicide in the last 6 months, I didn't click on it. I didn't click on it because I knew it was true. I didn't click on it because I knew that the world is actually that messed up, that many people feel like they shouldn't live anymore. I didn't click on it because I was afraid for what I was going to read, and I was afraid that the title wasn't actually the worst part. A few weeks later, I was thinking about making this video because I knew World Mental Health Day was coming up, and I clicked on it because I thought, you know what? As one of the people in this world that is willing to have this conversation, as one of the people in this world who's willing to talk about the fact that people kill not only each other, themselves, even on days that aren't officially marked as the day we should talk about it, I think it's important that I'm educated and that I'm aware and that I'm not afraid of these statistics, because I think it's a fear of these kind of statistics and it's a fear of that kind of pain that makes us not have these conversations nearly enough. And it's the fact that we don't have these conversations nearly enough that causes people like my friend to think he didn't know who to call after he dealt with one of his friends nearly killing himself. How do you not know who to call in a situation like that? And the only answer I could come up with is the fact that you don't know who to call because nobody talks about it. You don't know that it's okay to talk about it. You don't know that it's safe. You don't even know how to talk about it. It's such a strange thing. But anyway, I clicked on this article and I started reading, and my worst fear was confirmed. The title was not the scariest part. Now I started reading, and the title was only a little bit, because it went on to say that not only had 25% of the young people surveyed considered killing themselves, but 11% of people overall, it didn't matter what their age group was, had considered killing themselves. That is frightening. It said that anxiety levels were up 3 times what they were last year. It said that 40% of the respondents reported some kind of new or worsening mental health condition that they believed was directly affected by the current state of the world we live in. It said that 13.3% of the people surveyed had acknowledged turning to substance abuse as a way to cope, which is very often a road to deep depression and, unfortunately, suicide, because like I mentioned earlier, the vast majority of suicides happen when the person is intoxicated, when they don't have their best judgment about them. As somebody who's been there, I know that it is an incredibly scary thing, and it's to a sober, clear-thinking person, it would be almost too scary to think of. But to somebody who's intoxicated and feeling desperate, it wouldn't be that scary. Which is why substance abuse as a way to cope with feelings of depression and things, it is just a dangerous road to go down, and that's why I was so scared by this study. Then I decided to do a little bit more research. I decided to dig into it because, you know, there are a lot of resources out there. There are suicide hotlines, there are counseling services, there are all kinds of things, all kinds of places you can go for help. And I thought, you know what, I should go and I have a list of phone numbers that I give to people when they contact me when they need help. I have some of those resources in my back pocket, but it's been a while since I've done all that research. So I started doing a little more research, and I went to Google and I started typing in suicide. I was gonna search for suicide statistics, because the study that I had been sent was done by the CDC, and it was done in the US. So it was an American statistic, and I was very curious to know not the Canadian statistics and the world statistics and see how it all compared to each other. So I went to Google and I started typing the word suicide. Now, you know when you're typing something into Google, sometimes all you have to do is think about it and then push the first letter of what you were thinking and the autofill finishes out. Google's autofill is incredibly intuitive. The AI is frighteningly accurate. So when I start typing a word as freaky as suicide, you would think that I might get the SU or maybe the SUI typed before it autofill picks it up and says suicide. And you think maybe the first 9 or 10 suggestions should be something like, I'm considering suicide, who should I call? Or where do I turn with help with my friend who's thinking of suicide? Or how do I get help with my suicidal thoughts? You would think that with the technology that we have, when you start typing that word, those would be the sort of things that came up. So as I finished typing the word, or as I continued typing the word, I was shocked. As letter after letter, Google autofill failed to pick it up. I had to type the entire word before Google autofill picked up that I was typing the word suicide. And then you know what the first suggestion it gave me was? The Suicide Squad movie. What the fuck? There was not one single automatic suggestion that was any option of where you could turn for help. You think maybe somebody who's considering suicide might turn to the internet to find some options. Maybe in this day and age where all of humanity's collective knowledge lives on the fucking internet, you think maybe a company, a tech giant like Google, would be able to help a little bit? It pissed me off, as you might be able to tell, that I had to type the entire word suicide before I got even one suggested result that was related to suicide, and the suggested result was a fucking Hollywood movie. Are you kidding me? I'm somebody who Googles suicide a lot. I search these statistics often. I look at this kind of stuff frequently. It is in my search history. Google should know what I was talking about, and yet it didn't even pick it up. Why is it? And yet if I was searching for some kind of obscure tool, something that I could buy on Amazon, I would have the first couple letters in, and there would be so many suggestions I wouldn't even know what to do. I would make the decision to buy it without even knowing. I was so mad because we talk about it. We have all these World Mental Health Days and Suicide Prevention Days and all this stuff, and we have corporations, oh, we'll donate $1 for everybody that uses this hashtag towards mental health research and stuff, and then the ball gets dropped and nothing really happens. Still, with all this research and all this stuff done, nobody really knows where to turn. And when you go to the internet, the place where people go looking for answers today, you don't find the answers easily. It's weird. It's weird. And then I did a really weird, really dumb thing, especially when I was in a frustrated, angry state of mind. I sat down and I started watching Netflix, and I clicked on that new video that everyone's been talking about, The Social Dilemma. Holy smokes. In the video, they talked about how they could tell by people's social media use what state of mind they were in. They talked about how they could tell how people were thinking, and they could manipulate them and do things by giving them certain notifications at certain times. There was a scene in the movie where a young man had promised his mother that he wasn't going to look at his phone for a week. And he wasn't going to look at his phone for a week, and then she was going to buy him a new screen for his phone. So he had put it on the counter, plugged in, and he had slipped into a little bit of a depression, and it cut to a scene of these guys that were meant to represent the artificial intelligence of the social media world, talking about how he hadn't been active on social media in a few days. And they were talking about how they could incite him to get him back onto social media, and they knew he was in a depressed state, and they knew that people, they could tell. What was it? Right, he had liked every picture of this one girl for months and months and months, and then he stopped. And they knew that they could get him into a depressed state by telling him that that particular girl was in a new relationship with somebody else. So in one scene, he's down in the kitchen getting something to eat, and a notification comes up on his phone, and he looks, and it's a notification that his former crush was into somebody else, and it pushed him into a depressed state. And they could tell he was in a depressed state because he started using social media differently. He started using it again. And then they were able to serve him ads and things like that to manipulate his emotional state. And as I watched that scene, I wept. I wept because it made me realize that we have the technology to know when people are struggling. We have the technology that spies on people and manipulates them and uses it. We use it to leverage money out of people and track consumer trends and all this bullshit stuff that's useless for anything. And yet here we are sitting on the ability to know when people are not having a great time, and are we serving them ads about suicide hotlines? I've never seen a single advertisement for a suicide hotline in my life. That's not true. I've seen a Kids Help Phone advertisement on a bus one time when I was in grade 11. I'm 31 years old now. That's how ridiculously under-advertised that kind of stuff is. But I sat there watching this documentary thinking how backwards it is that we as a society have this technology. We're sitting on this wealth of information about each other and about psychology, and we have a serious understanding of dopamine addictions and dopamine feedback loops and all kinds of stuff that keeps people in a depressed state. And we have the ability to know when they're in a depressed state. We even have the ability to predict that they could be suicidal. And we don't use it. We don't use it. You know, so where's all this money going? Where's all this conversation that we're having going? What's actually being done? You know, antidepressants are one of the most heavily prescribed drugs in the world today, and we have more depressed people in the world today than we've ever had before. So clearly the pharmaceutical route is not working. You know, I have friends who've been in counseling for years and have never made any progress. So clearly some of the clinical psychology routes are not working. I can't say that entirely. There are some that are, and it's fantastic. I'm so glad that it is. But the fact of the matter is that, man, there's just not enough. You know, we live in a world where in the span of 1 year, anxiety has tripled. Where in the span of 1 year, 1/4 of our young people don't want to exist anymore. You know, and we're sitting here worrying about a virus that might kill a few 100,000, maybe 1 million people. And you know what? I'm not going to say it's not a problem. It's scary. It sucks. But it's an insignificant problem compared to the number of people that want to kill themselves, that we're not doing anything to help. You know, it's a seriously insignificant problem compared to the tech giants that are sitting on the technology that we could be using to help each other out and make the world a better place and make people's lives better and everything. And instead they're using it to market stuff and extort money out of people and make life worse and erode the fabric of the society that we live in. It was World Mental Health Day yesterday, and I'm having a tough time thinking about the state of mental health in the world. I'm having a tough time thinking about the state of mental health in the world because everywhere I go these days, I see people reaching their breaking point. I see people getting to their wits' end. I was walking in the park a couple months ago, early in the lockdown days, and there was a family walking along, a mother, father, 2 kids. 1 kid was on a bike, and this lady walked up to them and started shrieking at the top of her lungs that they were part of the problem, and you can't be here, and you guys are causing the spread, and you can't be out in public, and what are you doing? And this lady was berating this family for being out trying to get some exercise, talking about how they were spreading coronavirus, not realizing that she was doing exactly the same thing, being out in public, that she was yelling at them for. And as I watched this lady have a full-on meltdown, I thought to myself, I've seen that before. I've seen that before in the halls at the psychiatric ward at the hospital, where I used to go almost or twice a week for group therapy. I've seen it before in psychosis patients having meltdowns when they didn't know what else to do, when they were so scared and so overwhelmed by everything. And I watched this lady having this meltdown at the park and thought, holy smokes. And I remember so clearly watching it, thinking this is what we're going to be facing on a way bigger scale really soon. And I hate to even say it, but it's happening. It really is happening. Years ago, when I used to try to have to numb myself out quite a bit from life, I used to spend some time in some pretty dark corners of the internet, and one place I used to go was a subreddit called r public freakouts. You've probably seen the odd video from there over the years. It's a collection of videos of people having just massive freakouts in public, and often it's about little things. You know, you see people throwing stuff at fast food workers for getting an order wrong, or people losing their mind because somebody looked at them wrong, or somebody took the wrong parking spot and these people come unglued. And I used to watch it as just sick entertainment. But now, every now and then I pop in there because I feel like it's an interesting cross-section of the state of the world's mental health. Because the smaller the issues that people lose it over, the clearer it is that people are getting closer and closer to their trigger points, and they just can't take it anymore. And the unfortunate and terrifying thing is that the more people who just can't take it, the more people are going to start picking up those bottles of pills, or tying those knots in their garage rafters, or turning their gun the wrong direction, or pulling out their knife collection. Like, you just don't know. And it scares the hell out of me that we only talk about these things once in a while, when the calendar says is that we should. Because these are the kind of conversations we need to have every single day, and we need to remember that it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to not be okay and not tell somebody that you're not okay. You don't have to suffer alone. You don't have to suffer on your own. You don't have to go through it all by yourself. There is actually help out there. Despite what the lack of Google autofill results might lead you to believe, despite what the lack of advertisements might lead you to believe, there is help out there, and there are answers, and there is a better way. Life gets better. It does. It really does. It can. And we live in a scary time, and it's okay to be scared, it's okay to be overwhelmed, it's okay to not know what your next step is, it's okay to feel lost, it's okay, all of that is totally 100% okay. But you have to know that you're not alone, and you have to know that we have to have these conversations, we have to be honest when things are not well, because we're already dealing with enough weird stuff in the world. We don't need to deal with people starting to just suddenly kill themselves. We don't need another totally preventable mass cause of death. You know, people have too much potential. People have too much going on, and I just can't stand to keep seeing it get worse and worse and worse. And you know, the worst part about it all is, as I talk about this and I think about all the problems we face, and I think about everything that could be done about it, and I think, what do you do? And I don't have an answer. And that's what makes me so sad. Is that the only answer I have is to talk about it, and I can talk about it lots, and I'm glad I do, and I know it has some kind of impact, but I also know that there's people out there in the world that are sitting on money and resources and connections and ideas and technologies and stuff that could actually make a huge difference, and they're not. And the reason they're not is because there isn't enough money in it. And what a stupid reason is that? Because you know who you're never gonna get less money out of? I don't even know what I was about to say. You're never gonna get less. You're never gonna get more. You're never gonna get money out of somebody if they're dead. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's put some effort into helping each other stay alive. Let's put some effort into making the world a better place. Let's make the world some effort into making things okay, because the world's messed up enough as it is. We don't need to be messing it up worse. Guys, I'm just rambling now. I don't know what to say. I've kind of lost my train of thought. I'm honestly feeling a little squirrely myself today, as you might be able to tell from my eyes and my hair. And it's been a weird weekend. But I hope this video has some kind of value for you, and I hope that you can take some of what I've said to heart, and I really, really, truly do hope that you'll reach out to your friends if you need help, and you'll reach out and check on your friends and find out if they need help. And most importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, is talk about mental health issues. Don't shy away from the word suicide. Don't Don't cover it up. If a family member killed themselves, talk about it. Talk about why. We need to be honest. We can't be hiding this kind of thing from our kids. We can't be pushing this kind of things to the fringes of society. It is too important. Don't be scared, but don't be passive. We got to talk more about mental health, and we got to do more to help other people that are struggling. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.